Good morning, my name is Randall Rader from Public Works Stormwater Division, and this morning I'm going to be demonstrating a proper DMV Class B walk-around inspection. Very first thing we want to start out with is overall safety. So to ensure safety throughout our walk-around, first thing I'm going to do is check to ensure that the air brakes are on and that the vehicle is properly chocked. All right, so the first thing I'm checking is to ensure that the truck brake is pulled out and applied. Since this truck is also equipped with the trailer air supply brake, I'm gonna pull and make sure that that one is also applied. Both are applied, so after that, now I can move back out and begin my inspection. All right, now that we're back outside of the truck, my very first thing I'm doing is I'm gonna get an overall view of the vehicle. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm gonna step back a little bit, and I'm looking at the overall gravity, the center of gravity of the vehicle, making sure it's not leaning to the left or to the right, which would show an apparent either imbalance of the load or low air pressure on the tires. I'm also going to look down the left side, which is your passenger side, and the driver's side of my vehicle to make sure that none of the load is hanging off. All right, next I'm going to bend down and look underneath the vehicle, checking for a couple things. I'm checking for clearance, but I'm also looking to make sure that there's no visible apparent leaks. All right, now I'm gonna move forward to the vehicle. I'm gonna start on the passenger side briefly, and the very first thing I'm checking is my license plate. License plate, I wanna make sure that the license plate is permanently affixed to the vehicle, and that I'm also checking for clarity. And now I'm gonna move into some of my headlights. This truck has mounted lights for the snowplow, so I'm gonna check those, make sure that they are affixed to the vehicle. Make sure that the bracket is in good order, and now I'm gonna move to the lights and check that the lights are not cracked. I'm checking for clarity. I'm also checking to make sure that there's no condensation inside the lights. Move down to the actual vehicle lights. I'm checking the same thing, making sure that they are permanently mounted on the vehicle, that there's no cracks, no condensation inside, and I'm checking for clarity and cleanliness. Now as I move around to my driver's side, I'm gonna do the same thing, checking the truck light again, checking for, to make sure it's affixed to the vehicle, checking to make sure it's not cracked, I'm checking to make sure there's no condensation, and I'm looking for clarity and cleanliness. All right, now I'm moving to the driver's side plow mounted light here, making sure that the bolts are in place, making sure that the bracket is in good working order, not bent, and after that I'm gonna check the lights, so making sure all the screws are in place. I want to check my lights for clarity and cleanliness, making sure they're not cracked and that there is no condensation. All right, after that, my next move would be to pop the hood so we can do the under hood part of the inspection. All right, so to begin my under hood inspection, I like to work from the center of the engine block towards the outside. So the first place I'm going is to the center of the engine block, and I'm checking my water pump. As I'm looking at it, I want to make sure that there's no apparent leaks, that all the hoses going to and or from are free of dry rot and leaks as well. All right, I'm also looking to make sure that there's no non-factory welds or cracks in the water pump itself. Working my way out, I now come to my air compressor. So on my air compressor, I want to check and make sure that there's no excessive rust on the compressor itself. I'm looking to make sure all the bolts are in place. I'm looking for any apparent damage, any cracks, any non-factory welds. I'm also moving over to the belt. I'm checking the belt for tightness, and I'm also looking for any apparent dry rot or cracks in the belt itself. All right, working my way out, I have my coolant level. I'm looking to make sure that my coolant level is at a sufficient quantity. Checking the hoses going to and from. Again, making sure there's no dry rot, no bulges, no cracks in the hoses, and no apparent leaks. Now I'm moving my way out even further. I'm gonna go ahead and check my, my oil dipstick. All right, I would pull it all the way out and obviously check my oil. Working my way back, I also have my transmission fluid dipstick, and I would check that as well. Pulling it out, checking the fluids. All right, so now onto my steering column. I'm looking at the steering column, ensuring that it's not bent, no cracks, no non-factory welds on it. I'm also looking at my two linkage points, making sure that they're well lubricated and no damage as well. That moves me down to my steering gear box. Checking the box to make sure that all the bolts are in place, no cracks, damage, non-factory welds, anything of that nature. I'm also looking at the hose that comes from my power steering fluid into my steering gear box, making sure the hose itself is not dry rotted, cracked, leaking, anything of that nature. While I'm here, I would go ahead and check my fluid level to make sure that it is at the appropriate level. Work my way down, I'm going to check my pitman arm, looking again to make sure that there's no cracks, damage, non-factory welds. And as I move down where the drag link and the pitman arm meet, I'm looking at the castle nut and the cotter pin to make sure that it is firmly attached. Moving down to the drag link, following it down, making sure that there is no apparent damage, no cracks, and no non-factory type of bends. As I get down to the end, again, I'm looking for the castle nut and cotter pin to make sure this is attached. And at both ends, I'm also checking for proper lubrication. From here, I'm going to move into my suspension. All right, I'm looking at my leaf springs, looking to make sure that no more than 1/4 is damaged or cracked. And I'm also looking for my 4 points of connection. My 4 points of connection would be one in the front, my 2 U-bolts here and the one in the rear, and then my rear point of connection all the way in the rear back here. I would also now check my front shock absorber, making sure that the top and the bottom are both firmly attached, that there's no apparent leaks coming from the shock, and that there's no damage or non-factory welds. All right, so at this point, I'm going to check my front air brake chamber. First, I'm going to make sure it's permanently mounted. I would check it, make sure there's no dings, dents, any type of damage or non-factory welds. I'm also checking the air hose for any apparent leaks, any dry rot. I'm checking the points of connection. I'm also going to check the back slack adjuster. Slack adjuster should be at a 90-degree angle when the brakes are engaged, and there should be no more than 1 inch play on the slack adjuster. All right, now I'm going to work away to from the brakes, the brake pads. I should have sufficient brake pads, and I'm looking in at the brake drum itself to make sure that there's no grease, oil, or other foreign matter that would prevent the pads from properly gripping. Working my way out, I'm going to see the inner rim, checking the inner rim, make sure there's no dings, dents, any damage, or any non-factory welds that could prevent the rim or the tire from properly seating. My inside of my tire, I'm going all the way around the tire. I'm looking to make sure that there's no bulges, no cuts, no bad dry rot, any damage to this tire. All right, coming across the top of the tire, I'm looking at the first thing is the front tread. I'm looking to make sure that there's at least 4/32 in the major tire grooves, and I'm also looking for any nails or anything that could be stuck in the tire that could that could cause damage to this tire. All right, looking at my sidewall, making sure that there's no cuts, any bulges, any foreign matter stuck inside the tire. Coming down now, I would check my air pressure here with the gauge, and I would check my brake drum inside the gap here to make sure that there's no dings, dents, apparent damage to the brake drum itself. Coming down to my rim, the outside of my rim, again, I'm looking for the same thing, dings, dents, damage, non-factory welds on the rim itself. Coming down to my lug nuts, I want to make sure all the lug nuts are in place and are tight. You'd be able to tell maybe if one of them's loose, either by shaking it or visible rust marks. And then I'm going to come into my front hub seal, looking to make sure that all my bolts are in place and that there's no visible and apparent leaks from that front hub seal. All right, at this point, I would go ahead and check my front windshield and my windshield wipers since I'm here. Pull my windshield wipers back. I would check the wipers, making sure that they're in good working order, not excessively dry rotted, all right, and that they do freely move. Looking at my front windshield, checking cleanliness, that there's no dings, cracks, anything like that in this front windshield, and that the only authorized sticker is going to be the Virginia State Inspection sticker on the front of the vehicle. No other stickers are allowed on the front of that windshield. Now working my way around. All right, I'm at the driver's side door. First thing is I'm checking my 2 windows. Again, checking for clarity and cleanliness, making sure they're not broke, cracked, anything of that nature. Coming to my mirrors, making sure that the connection points are firmly attached to the door. Checking the mirrors themselves, making sure they're not broken, cracked, or anything of that nature. Opening the door, all right, I'm gonna swing the door, making sure that it has free swing. I would come inside and check my hinges, making sure that they're not broken, damaged, or dented in any way. While I'm here, I'm gonna check one of my safety features, and that would be that the fire extinguisher is in the vehicle, properly mounted, and that is at within the green range on the vehicle. At this point, you would also check fuses or extra circuit breakers, depending on what vehicle you would have. From here, I would work my way down to my steps. All right, I would give the steps a good shake, making sure that they're properly mounted, making sure that all my bolts are in both the top and the bottom step. All right, making sure that there's sufficient tread, and that now that the stairs are actually bolted on to the truck. All right, so from the stairs, I would move to my air tanks. I have my primary and secondary air tanks. I want to check and make sure that the hose is coming to them. There's no damage, dry rot, cracks on the hoses. I'm also going to check the connection points. I'm going to check the tanks themselves, make sure they're not dented, no non-factory welds or any damage to them. I'm going to check the connection points. This uses bolts and straps right here, making sure that they're properly mounted. I'm also going to check the relief valves on both, making sure that they do open and that there's no foreign matter that's preventing them from being able to be released. All right, at this point, I'm going to work my way down the frame of the vehicle, looking at the frame, making sure that there's no dents, non-factory welds, any bends, any structural damage in the frame itself. I'm also making sure that everything that is attached to the vehicle has all the bolts in place. All right, and that brings us now to the back set of wheels for the vehicle. At this point, we're actually going to crawl under the vehicle to do our inspection. All right, now once under the vehicle, I'm going to check my drive shaft. And I'm looking at the entire drive shaft from front to back, making sure that it's not bent or offset. I'm looking at any apparent dings, damages, any non-factory welds. All right, I'm also looking at my linkage. You have your front linkage, your middle, and your rear, depending on the size of your vehicle. I'm making sure all those bolts are in place, that the linkage is connected, and I'm also looking at the connection points for lubrication. All right, while I'm right here, I'm going to check my rear leaf springs, making sure that no more than 1/4 of a leaf spring is damaged. If so, the vehicle will be placed out of service. I'm also checking again my 4 points of connection: my front, my 2 U-bolts, and then once we work our way to the rear, we'll check our rear one. Now that we're here, we're going to work our way and we're going to look at our brake pads. We're looking at our brake pads again, making sure it's a sufficient brake pad to stop the vehicle. We're checking the brake drum to ensure there's no grease, oils, or foreign matter that would prevent the vehicle from stopping with the pads. All right, the inside of the rim, just like the front, we're checking to make sure that there's no dings, dents, or any damage or non-factory welds to the rim. Checking the inner wall of the inside tire. We're checking to make sure that the tire has no bulges, no cuts, no foreign matter stuck inside that tire. As I work my way out, I'm still on my inside tire. I'm looking at the tread depth. On rear tires, it can be no less than 2/32 of an inch tread depth on the tire itself. All right, I'm still on my inside tire. I'm checking the outer wall of the inside tire. Just like all the others, I'm checking to make sure that there's no bulges, cuts, or any foreign matters stuck into the tire. All right, working my way down here, I would check the spacer, make sure that the spacing all the way around the tire is the same. And I'm actually looking in between the tire, making sure there's no foreign matter lodged inside that tire. All right, now moving to the inner wall of the outside tire. I'm making sure, just like the others, that there's no bulges, no cuts, no foreign matter stuck into that tire. As I work away across the top of my outer tire, still again, 2/32 of tread depth on this tire. Checking my outer wall now, making sure there's no bulges, no excessive dry rot, no cuts, and again, no foreign matter stuck into my tire. All right, now at this point, I'm gonna check the pressure of both of my rear tires. Inside the hole, I could check the pressure of my inside tire through the valve stem, and my valve stem for my outer tire is located right here. I now have my outer rim. I'm checking the outer rim, making sure there's no dings, dents, cracks, non-factory welds, or any damage to this rim. Coming in, I'm checking all my lug nuts, making sure my lug nuts are in place, and making sure that they're not loose or have any visible damage to them. Working my way to my rear hub seal, again making sure all the bolts are in place and that there's no visible leaks on the rear hub seal itself. As I work around, I come upon a light, so I'm checking that it is a red light in the rear and that there's no damage to it, no cracks. I'm checking cleanliness and clarity, and I'm making sure there's no condensation within that light. While I'm right here, I'm going to check my rear mud flap, making sure it is positively attached to the vehicle and that there's no damage to this mud flap. While I'm here, I'm going to check my rear license plate, making sure that the rear license plate is mounted. I would also want to ensure that the rear license plate and the front license plate do match. All right, we skipped it earlier for ease, but now that we're on the back side, we can check our rear air brake chamber, looking at the chamber itself to make sure there's no damage, making sure it's positively mounted to the vehicle, checking the hoses that come into it, making sure that there's no leaks, no apparent dry rot. Just like the front, I would go to my slack adjuster, make sure the slack adjuster has no more than 1 inch play while the brakes are engaged, and also that it is at a 90-degree angle. At this point, I would check all the lights on the rear side of the vehicle. All my red lights, making sure that they are positively mounted, they're not cracked. I'm checking for cleanliness, clarity, and to ensure there's no condensation. All right, I would also check my white lights, my backup lights for the same thing, making sure they're positively mounted, looking for cleanliness, clarity, and that there's no cracks, which would show condensation. All right, at this time we have conducted a complete inspection of one side of the Class B vehicle. For DMV testing purposes, we would not have to inspect this side of the vehicle unless it is something we have not previously mentioned. However, for real world operations, you would complete the inspection of the passenger side of the vehicle as well. So for testing purposes, we're gonna move ahead and go to our exhaust system. On the exhaust system, we're looking at the mounts, making sure all the mounts are positively mounted to the vehicle, all the bolts are in place, and we're checking our complete exhaust system, looking for any holes, any excessive rust, and any signs of soot, which would show a possible leak. Now we're moving to our fuel drum. On the fuel drum, we're looking to make sure first, underneath, that there's no visible and apparent leaks. And we're gonna check the straps of the fuel tank here to ensure that they are tight. Any possible shiny metal would show that these straps may be loose. We're also looking at the drum itself to make sure that there's no dings, damage, dents, or any non-factory welds. All right, since we're on the passenger side, we're gonna check another one of our safety features. We're gonna check our safety triangles here. All right, we would ensure that there is at least 3 of our safety triangles. Moving our way down, we have 2 more things to check on this side. We have our alternator, and on our alternator, we're looking at our belts, checking for proper tension, but we're also looking at the back side of the alternator, looking at the wires coming to and make sure that there's no burnt or frayed wiring. We're checking the actual alternator housing itself, making sure all the bolts are in place, making sure that there's no damage or non-factory welds to the alternator. We would also check our coolant hose on this side, making sure that it's properly mounted and that there's no apparent leaks or no dry rot on the hose. Working our way down to our windshield wiper fluid. First, we're just going to check and make sure that the tank is properly mounted to the vehicle, and then we're going to make sure that it is at a proper and sufficient level. All right, that now concludes the exterior portion of the walk-around inspection. We will now move to the inside to complete the in-cab portion of the inspection. All right, so when I get in the vehicle, the very first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get in and I'm going to put my seatbelt on. Once my seatbelt's on, I'm going to go ahead and start up the vehicle, allow it to start building up air pressure within my tanks. All right, at this point of the in-cab inspection, you need to demonstrate everything within the cab of the vehicle. So first, I'm gonna start from my very exterior, and I'm gonna look at my mirrors, make sure that my mirrors are properly set and properly aligned from where I'm sitting. From there, I'm gonna go to my steering wheel, make sure that I have play, but no more than 2 inches of play on a 20-inch wheel. And I'm also gonna visually and audibly check my horn. All right, so from this part, I'm gonna start with all my markers. My left turn signal, my right turn signal, my windshield wipers, and my washer fluid. I would also check my 4-way flashers. All right, my headlights. I'm gonna check my parking lights, then put them on headlights, and check my panel lights to ensure that they illuminate and that they dim. All right, now that I have them, I'm gonna check my high beams, ensure my high beams do come on and off. Also, I have to do the same with my plow lights. Ensure that if the vehicle's equipped with plow, you do the same thing on your plow lights. You check that the bright lights and the normal lights do work. All right, continuing around, the first gauge I come to is an air application gauge. Not all CDL trucks are gonna have this, but this one does. So I'm gonna check that. Mash on your brake, let it go. Make sure that the air application gauge goes up and returns back down. Next gauge is my transmission fluid temperature. I'm checking it, and it is approximately 140 degrees Fahrenheit. My oil PSI is approximately 30 to 31 PSI. Moving up to my coolant temperature, it's approximately about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Currently idling at about 700 RPM at 0 miles an hour. All right, the gear selector on the dash shows that we are in neutral, 6,619 miles. Moving over, we are at 3/4 of a tank of gas, approximately 14.5 volts. Primary air tank is about 120 PSI. Secondary air tank is also approximately 120 PSI. All right, now moving down to my gear selector. All right, it is in neutral. I'm gonna put my foot on the brake, put it in drive, then I'm gonna work my way up through the gears. First, then I'd place it in reverse, back in neutral. Working through my climate control gauges. This is my fan speed. I would ensure that all the different fan speeds work. Temperature gauge from cool to hot. And then my climate control selection from AC all the way across to my defrost and then back. At this point, I would check my 2 in-cab brakes, my truck air brake. I push to release, pull to apply, and then this truck is equipped with a trailer air supply, push to release, pull to apply. All right, after the brakes, I would work my way to my remaining dash controls, and I'm showing that I'm currently at 0 amps.
Ready?
All right, now we will begin our air brake leakage test. All right, one thing to clarify, this truck is set up as a Class A vehicle also. It also has a trailer air supply. For purposes of a Class B test, we're gonna completely ignore this and just focus on the truck parking brake itself. All right, so now our pressure is built up to 120 PSI in both the primary and secondary tank, and that's what you're looking for, anywhere from 120 to 120 PSI. Next step is you're gonna turn the ignition and the engine completely off. Push in and release the truck parking brake. Wait for the initial drop in pressure. Next thing is you're gonna push and hold the brake pedal in the full downward position. As you push and hold, you are looking for no more than 3 PSI loss over 1 minute period. All right, for purposes of this demonstration, we're gonna go ahead and move forward. I release. I will now turn the ignition back on, but do not start the engine. Once the gauges come and reset, you are now going to begin to what's called pump down the brakes. You will start pumping the brakes. At approximately 60 PSI, I should get an audible alarm. And between 20 and 40 PSI, There's my audible alarm. Between 20 and 40 PSI, the truck parking brake should pop out and engage the brakes. There we go. The truck parking brake has popped out and engaged. Next step is to start the truck. And at this point, you need to build the air pressure all the way back up to 120 to 125 PSI. And at that point, we're going to check to make sure that the truck parking brake actually is engaged and will hold the truck. All right, now our tanks are built back up to 120 PSI both. So the next thing we're going to do is check to make sure that the truck parking brake is engaged and will hold the vehicle. Place your foot on the brake. Take the gear selector and place it in drive. As you take your foot off the brake, slightly apply the gas. The truck does not move. That ensures that the truck parking brake is actually engaged and holding. Put your foot back on the brake, place the vehicle back in neutral, and that concludes your air brake leakage test. All right, at this point, I would ask my assistant or the CDL testing official to step on the outside of the vehicle and check my exterior of my lights as I go through them. My headlights are on, so I'm gonna go high beams, back to my regular beams. This vehicle is engaged with plow lights, so I would do the same. Check the plow lights and go to high beams and back to regular. All right, I'm now gonna check my left turn signal, my right turn signal. And on this truck again, you have to do it as on the plow as well. Left turn and right turn. All right, now I'm gonna engage my four-way flashers. And that concludes the front. I would ask my assistant to move to the rear to check the back. All right, now that my assistant or the testing official is at the rear, my four-way flashers are still on. I would turn them off. I can do my left turn signal, my right turn signal, engage my brakes, and also place the vehicle in reverse to ensure that the backup lights are illuminated and working. All right, that concludes our inspection today. We've completed an exterior walk-around inspection, the interior in-cab inspection, and the air brake leakage test for a Class B vehicle. Thank you.